How would you sort of describe the food system? Because maybe it's a different way of viewing it as an American compared to a
Sure.
Norwegian, or how would you like describe the food system and how complex it is? Because producing something in big scale always have some trade-offs, right? So how can you like get an introduction into the food system? Maybe since you worked so close with it.
Absolutely. I mean, so one of the work I did some projects at the Food and Drug Administration when I was here in with the government, and through that I kind of got a glimpse into how the food system worked. But I also had kind of an outside passion, just liking food, and I was curious about the impacts of our food systems. Coming out of college, I was looking into things like aquaponics, vertical greenhouses, all of these different new things that were coming up at the time. John and I actually built a aquaponics setup in our apartment. We had a couple fish in a fish tank, and we started growing some herbs and was cycling that water. So trying to just explore with it, looking at these different components. But I think what you mentioned there, one of the things that's really hard to grasp is scale. So you can talk to the oyster farmers and see what that scale looks like. And you look at the numbers when it comes to salmon farming and shrimp farming and what total consumption looks like. It's such a big problem. And, what I've come to learn, and, the part that I think is exciting is that there's just so many challenges when it comes to food. You can talk about producing food that's good for the environment. You can talk about it at scale when you talk about the entire world. There's just so much going on and so many challenges. It's really a core piece of, I think, what our future looks like. We got to find a way to feed all these people, and we got to find a way that does it in balance with the ocean or with the world and the environment. So that, I think, is what really got us into this food system. But yeah, the food system in general, there's so many trade-offs. There's not one single solution in any of these problems.
Got you. So when you decided to act on this idea, if you were to submit to YC Combinator or something, what's the simplest way of putting the idea? Because I guess at the start it was basically maybe just two, three sentences on a vision plate, and then that's the vision, and then go build it, right? So how would you explain the concept in the simplest terms possible?
Ooh, simplest terms possible. Um, I think the simplest terms possible is we use the tagline "Healthy Farms for Healthy Seas," and that, I think, encompasses a lot of what we're trying to accomplish. We think that when it comes to the oceans, the healthy farms will contribute to creating a healthier ocean. And if you want to talk VCs and the markets and whatnot, the oceans is an untapped one. It's an unregulated space. The amount of activity that goes on, I think the ocean represents some of the largest challenges that we have in the world. It also represents potentially a solution to a lot of those challenges. So the opportunity, we think, is definitely there. But what it comes down to is helping farmers have the healthiest farms that they can. We see that as the biggest and most important asset when it comes to growing this industry and the challenges ahead.
Maybe you also just can explain the sort of the balance or maybe the development between aquaculture and wild fisheries, so people also get that point, right? Because if you're gonna produce more food in scale, it's not gonna come from wild fisheries. You have to sort of use aquaculture as a tool, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges and questions that we hear, particularly here in the States. We in the US, we don't know much about aquaculture. It's not a big industry. It's not viewed as a big system, and to be honest, it's viewed pretty negatively when you bring it up. But going back to what we talked about with food systems and the scale and the problems ahead, when it comes to aquaculture, I think in wild fisheries, I think it's really interesting when you look at the facts that 1 in 7 people in the world depend on seafood as their primary source of protein. I think you can shoot holes in any sort of way that we produce food, on land, in the water. There's positives and negatives to every single solution, but aquaculture, I think, has a lot of potential. It's not to say the industry hasn't made mistakes in the past, but the potential is always been there. I don't think we can continue fishing, wild fisheries are sustainable long term. I just don't think those numbers, match up. There's no way we can keep fishing the oceans, and we got to figure out how to do it in a better way. And everything can't be on land. So we got to figure out what's the right way that we want to accomplish it in the oceans.
Agree.
But yeah, so I think aquaculture has to fit in.